Hey everybody, how's everybody today on this Tuesday for our Tuesday talk? Jennifer Weithman with Benchmark Realty. And I was asked by one of my friends to talk about a situation that arose in a contract that one of her family members was tangentially associated with. And I had a similar situation with one of my buyers a few years back. So we're going to talk today about what happens, particularly if a seller passes in the midst of a transaction. So a few years back, I had a situation where somebody was looking to buy a home that was a living estate sale, and sibling A was the power of attorney and was selling the home to help with expenses and such for the parent who was had lived there and who was failing. And sibling B was the executor or executrix, and the parent died. So the power of attorney was therefore nullified, and the executor took over, and the executor didn't want to sell the home. So the property came off market. And then I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I had a part house that I was listing, and one of the spouses was in ill health, and the other spouse had a power of attorney, and they had been in the process of transitioning to be closer to some additional family for assistance. And the buyers, moving forward, purchasing the home, and the spouse who was ill passed. And in that situation, the spouse who survived, the house was already under contract, and the spouse who survived was wanting to move still. So we had to provide a death certificate and the power of attorney and all of that. And they had had things set up because they knew that the spouse who was ill was failing. And they were able to go ahead and proceed with the sale, and the buyers purchased the home. The situation that arose with my friend was that the owner of the home was not in great health, and he had a will. He didn't have any heirs, didn't have a spouse, etc. So my friend's family member was the heir to the property, the real estate property, and another friend was the co-heir with my friend's family member to the personal property. So the will stipulated that if the seller passed, that the personal property would all be sold and proceeds split between my friend's family member and the person who was the power of attorney, and that my friend's family member would get the house. And the house was for sale, it was under contract, and the seller did pass. The contract in that situation, the my friend's family member did not want to sell the house. They wanted to live there. That was more beneficial to them. And that was also the reason that the seller had set that up in the will. They knew that it would be best if he were to pass, that they were to have this home to live in. And if he had ended up selling the home, I believe that some of the proceeds would have gone to establish my friend's family member, and all of that then becomes personal property. The proceeds, when it's converted out of real estate and into cash, become personal property. So it would have been split between the person who had the power of attorney and my friend's family member. So when the seller passed, the real estate agent for both the buyer and the seller wanted the sale to proceed. The person who had had the power of attorney wanted the sale to proceed, but the new heir to the real property did not. And they were trying to force them to continue the contract, and he was not obliged to do that. I did suggest that they contact an attorney, a real estate attorney, look over all the contracts, look over the will, do all of that sort of thing, because it is going to be specific on how that is handled in that situation. The contract for the state of Tennessee on survivability, the survivor clause, reads that any provision contained herein, which by its nature and effect is required to be performed after closing, is going to survive. That's the survivability of the contract, but it doesn't necessarily address survivability of the parties involved. So it depends on how they have their estate and their things set up. That's why it's really important to do planning when you own real estate. That's Arrow. And I was going to talk about some dog and pet situations with fair housing and support animals and that. I guess he's chafed. He's just barking at the neighbors who are mowing their lawn. It's okay, boy. It's okay. It's all safe. I promise. We're safe. They're outside. So he's a good guard dog. So anyway, it's really important to have your affairs in order when you're moving into real estate. Sometimes the situation is like, okay, well, what happens if a spouse dies and you have this contract going on? Are you able to perform on it? And that's, again, a question for a lawyer and a question for finances. Are you able to perform on that contract? And then what does the seller need to do? And it all needs to be negotiated. So it's not that there's a cut and dry situation, but I can tell you that there are those two, well, three events that I know of personally. And in one, the property was removed from sale before it was listed or during the listing because the person who was the executor didn't want to sell it. In the second situation, the seller knew that one of the members may pass and they had arranged for the sale to continue. And in the third, the executor, the will stated that the home did not have to be sold. So the person who was the new heir had the authority to determine that. The other thing that is going to become really tricky with real estate as more and more people do their DNA test is how heirs are. So we're going to talk about that too. So my dad and mom have two children, myself and my brother, and that's all we know of. Really don't expect to have any others. And if my parents were to pass and we were to sell the home and round numbers, because history major, let's say that we had proceeds of 60,000, it would be split 30-30 to each of my brother and I, 50-50, 30,000 each. So then let's say that somebody does their DNA and it turns out that my father had was their father. Like, I don't know, days in the military, who knows what. Okay, so let's just say that that scenario happens. And there's not really a time limit on this. I learned this when I was in a title class on, it's called You Can't Take It With You. So in that situation, if the will has not been written to handle real estate as personal property, then you can get into a really sticky situation where that estate, that house, even though somebody else has already bought it, 10 years from now, what have you, that estate owes money to that newfound heir in Tennessee, the way it's written right now. So, what the title company that was putting on this presentation said was that it's really critical for you to have owner's title insurance. So, owner's title insurance is in conjunction with the lender's title insurance, which will always be there. But when the federal government redid the entire mortgage buying process back in October 15 or 16, called DRID, infinite wisdom. They didn't have any realtors, any title, any mortgage people on it. They're just like, hey, this is what we need to do. We need to make this more transparent. And beside owner's title insurance, it says it's an optional fee for the lender and for closing. And it is. And we're probably going to bring on a title lawyer to talk about this because it is not something you want to skip, regardless of if there may or may not be a found heir. But certainly, if you're buying an estate sale, you don't want to skip having that title insurance. So, bottom line is, if you're in a transaction and a party in that transaction passes, there are multiple things that can go on. The contract doesn't specifically address it, but it's how their will and estate and who's their power of attorney and who's their executor handles it. And then when you have bought a home, again, especially if it was in an estate situation, I'm going to strongly advise my clients to be getting title insurance. If you have questions, if you have something else, like my friend suggested we talk about this today, that you would like to talk about, please message me on whatever format you're seeing this on. If you have comments or want additional information, if it's about the law, I'm going to point you to the direction of a good lawyer who would be able to answer those questions because I'm not a lawyer, I'm a realtor. but just telling you from examples that I've gone through. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope you guys have a terrific Tuesday. Next week, like I said, according to Arrow, we're probably going to be talking about tenants and their support animals and some changes that have come down through some of those. So take care and get in touch with me if you need me for buying or selling. Oh, one other thing I wanted to talk about because we haven't talked about market stats in just a little while. And I shared something, you'll be able to see it on my broker page, and it was the number of views that benchmark listings have had in July. And it's astronomical, in my opinion. So I got to scroll down to it. Hold up just a second, y'all. Okay. So just in July, and this is just through List Hub, which is our service that we use via our MLS, our brokerage, to send out our listings to other websites. These numbers do not include Zillow or Realtor.com views, just the ones that go out through List Hub. Benchmark listings, there were 1,441. All right, good number. There were 425,402 viewings on those listings. So again, math major, not a history major. If you have 425,402, evidently I'm not a typist either, viewings, and you divide that by 1441, that's an average of 295 views per listing. So if you want to get your home out there and seen by buyers who are actively looking, our numbers are still strong, then I suggest that a benchmark agent, myself, Jennifer Weithman, is a great way to go because we are doing really good at marketing your house and getting them sold. So, and just to compare, in June, there were 341,429 viewings on 1424 listings. So I'll do that really quick math with my calculator. Divided by 1424, and that's an average of 239. So there are more buyers out there looking, and we're still doing a great job. That's like over 200 views, almost 300 this month on your listing. Your listing is going to get sold if people are doing their job, and we at Benchmark are. So I hope you guys have a great day. Contact me if you are interested in buying or selling. I'd love to help you out.